In the quiet, remote mountains of Green Valley, a peaceful farming community was about to face its greatest challenge. The valley, known for its rolling hills and serene landscapes, was home to a man named John Carter. To most, John was just a simple farmer, tending to his land and living a quiet life. But John had a secret, one that would soon change the fate of the entire valley. John wasn't always a farmer. For 30 years, he had been one of the most skilled and deadly commanders in the U.S. military's elite Delta Force. His code name was Shadow, a name that struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. He had led missions so secretive that they would never be recorded in history books. Now, at 65, John had retired to Green Valley, hoping to leave his past behind. But his past wasn't done with him. One crisp morning, as John walked his property with his loyal German shepherd Max, he noticed something unusual: fresh tire tracks in the mud. They were deep, made by heavy vehicles, and they didn't belong to anyone in the valley. John's instincts kicked in. Something was wrong. His neighbor, Mary, drove up in her old pickup truck, her face pale with worry. "John, did you hear about the Smiths? They packed up and left last night. No warning. And this morning, I saw strange men at their place. Big black SUVs, men who don't look like they're from around here." John's jaw tightened. He knew what this meant. The Cartel, a ruthless Mexican drug organization, had set its sights on Green Valley. They were buying up properties, forcing people out, and using the farms as distribution routes for their drugs. Mary's voice trembled as she spoke. "John, these aren't ordinary criminals. They're organized, well-funded, and dangerous." John nodded, his mind already racing through scenarios. He had dealt with worse in his time. But this was different. This was his home. He patted Mary's truck and said, "Don't worry about me, Mary. Just be careful. They're targeting this valley, and it won't be long before they come knocking on your door." As Mary drove away, John whistled for Max and headed to his barn. Beneath the ordinary tools and farm equipment lay a hidden cellar, a secret stash of military-grade weapons, communication gear, and tactical equipment. John had hoped he would never need to use it again, but he was always prepared. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an old contact in law enforcement. "Cartels moving fast. 7 properties taken in the last month. Watch your back." John pocketed the phone and pulled out detailed maps of the valley. His property was at a crucial junction, controlling the main road and overlooking 3 different approach routes. No wonder the cartel wanted it. The sound of engines caught his attention. Through his window, he watched 3 black SUVs roll past his gate, moving slowly, too slowly. They were scouting, marking their next target. John's eyes narrowed. "They don't know who they're dealing with, Max," he muttered. John spent the rest of the morning calling his old teammates, men who had fought beside him in places that didn't officially exist. "It's Shadow," he said into the phone. "Remember that favor you owe me? Time to pay up." One by one, his team agreed to come. They were older now, but their skills were still sharp. By afternoon, his plans were in motion. 4 of his old team members were on their way. Mike, the sniper; Tom, the explosives expert; Sam, the communications specialist; and Dave, the medic. Together, they had faced warlords, terrorists, and entire armies. A cartel wouldn't know what hit them. As the sun began to set, John walked the property again, this time with the eyes of a battlefield commander. Every hill, every tree line, every approach could be used. The cartel thought they were targeting an old man's farm. Instead, they were walking into a kill zone designed by one of the most experienced special operations commanders in history. Max barked suddenly, alerting John to more vehicles approaching. The same SUVs from earlier stopped at his gate. 5 men emerged, their expensive suits out of place against a rugged landscape. John straightened his back, adjusted his worn baseball cap, and prepared to play the role of a simple farmer. Let them underestimate him. It was a mistake they would only make once. The leader, a man named Carlos, approached with a practiced smile. "Mr. Carter, beautiful property you have here," he said, extending his hand. John shook it, noting the man's firm grip, a weak attempt to establish dominance. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" John asked, his voice friendly but measured. Carlos gestured to the valley. We represent an investment group. We've been acquiring properties in the area, expanding operations, you might say. Your land has certain features that interest us. John leaned against his fence post, the picture of relaxation. Inside, he was marking fields of fire, cataloging weapons, noting their stances. Not interested in selling, he said simply. Land's been in my family too long. Carlos's smile tightened. Perhaps I wasn't clear. We're prepared to offer significantly above market value. $3 million cash. More than generous for a ranch this size. John scratched Max behind the ears, buying time to observe the two men by his barn. They were checking sight lines, defensive positions, not real estate investors. Money's not everything, John replied. Some things aren't for sale. The friendly facade cracked slightly. Carlos stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mr. Carter, let me be direct. This valley is changing. Progress, you might say. You can be part of that change and profit from it. Or you might find this valley becoming very unwelcoming. Accidents happen, especially to stubborn old men who don't know when to take a good deal. John straightened slowly, allowing just a hint of steel to enter his voice. Sounds like a threat, Mr. Reyes. Carlos's eyes widened slightly at the use of his real name, a calculated slip to let them know John wasn't as ignorant as he appeared. Simply stating facts, Carlos replied, recovering quickly. Fighting progress would be unwise. One of the men by the barn called out in Spanish. Something about security cameras. John had let them spot the obvious ones, hiding his real surveillance system much more carefully. Think about it, Carlos said, producing a business card. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer becomes significantly less generous. John took the card, noting the fake company name. I'll sleep on it, he said. Carlos turned to leave, then paused. Beautiful dog, German shepherd, yes? Would be a shame if something happened to him. Max growled, picking up on John's tension. John kept his hand gentle on the dog's head, but his voice carried the weight of 3 decades of combat experience. That would be a very serious mistake. Something in his tone made Carlos hesitate. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and John saw a genuine surprise. They had expected an easy mark, a simple farmer they could bully or buy. Instead, they had caught a glimpse of something else, something dangerous. As the cartel men retreated to their vehicles, John watched them drive away, already planning his next moves. His phone buzzed, a text from Mike. For hours out, teams assembled. John typed back, make it 3? Company's already knocking. Inside his house, John activated his real security system. Cameras hidden in trees covered every approach. Motion sensors monitored the perimeter, and everything fed into a command center he had built in his basement. He pulled up satellite images of the valley, marking known cartel properties. His land was the missing piece, controlling the main valley access point and providing clear lines of sight for miles. His phone rang again. It was Mary, her voice tight with worry. John, they were at your place, weren't they? I saw the SUVs. Just a friendly business proposition, John replied, checking his weapon cache. Nothing to worry about. Don't lie to me, Mary said. Miller tried to stand up to them. Next day, his barn burned down. Day after that, his wife's car crashed on a straight road. No witnesses. John, what are you planning? Better you don't know, John said. Just trust me. After hanging up, John descended into his cellar. The hidden room was exactly as he had left it, weapons and equipment maintained and ready. He began checking each piece methodically, muscle memory taking over as he field-stripped and reassembled rifles. Max whined softly from above. John paused, listening. Another vehicle was approaching. He checked the cameras. It was a local sheriff's deputy, a young man named Steve. John met him at the gate. Steve looked nervous, shuffling his feet. Mr. Carter, heard you had visitors today. Word travels fast. Listen, about the others, Miller, the Smiths. We know what happened, but we can't prove anything. These people, they're connected. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. John nodded. Appreciate the warning, deputy, but I can handle myself. As Steve drove away, John's phone chimed again. It was a message from Sam, intercepted their comms. Full assault planned. They're not waiting 24 hours. John smiled grimly. Perfect. Let them come in force. Let them think they have the advantage. 3 decades of combat experience had taught him that overconfident enemies made mistakes, and he had learned long ago how to turn those mistakes into opportunities. He had 3 hours until his team arrived. 3 hours to turn his farm into a fortress. The cartel thought they were dealing with a stubborn old man. By morning, they would realize a mistake, but by then it would be far too late. The sound of engines echoed through the valley as John watched through his security feeds. For vehicles approached from different directions, his team using old tactics to avoid being tracked. Mike's black pickup came first, followed by Tom in a weathered Jeep. Sam and Dave arrived minutes later, their vehicles covered in dust from backroad driving. John met them in the barn, away from prying eyes. 20 years melted away as his old team assembled, their movements still synchronized after all this time. Mike, the sniper, carried his custom rifle case like it was part of him. Tom brought enough explosives to level a small town, all carefully concealed in construction equipment cases. Sam's communication gear looked civilian, but John knew it could crack military-grade encryption. Dave's medical kit was upgraded but familiar. He had patched them up through worse situations than this. Just like old times, Mike said, his voice gruff but warm, though usually we had government backing us up. Government would just slow us down, Tom replied, already examining the barn structure. Nice setup, John. Good sight lines, multiple escape routes. You weren't kidding about being ready. John spread a detailed map across his workbench. Cartel's been systematic, taking key properties, establishing distribution routes. They're not just running drugs. They're setting up a permanent operation. Sam connected his laptop, bringing up intercepted communications. They're professional, ex-military in their ranks, mostly Mexican special forces. But they're arrogant, sloppy with their security. Their mistake. How many are we dealing with? Dave asked, organizing his medical supplies. Main force is 30 men, John said, pointing to marked locations. 2 separate groups. First team's a muscle. They handle intimidation, arson, accidents. Second teams are professionals, actual combat experience, proper tactical training. Mike examined the terrain through the barn door. Kill zone's perfect. Natural bottleneck here. High ground advantage. We can funnel them right where we want them. They'll come in force, John warned. No more pretense of being businessmen. They've got heavy weapons, armor, probably air support. Good. Tom grinned, pulling out his demolition plans. Been a while since we had a proper fight. This isn't just about holding them off. John's voice turned serious. We end this permanently. Not just here. We shut down their entire operation in the valley. The team sobered, recognizing the tone. It was a voice that had led them through impossible missions, that had brought them all home alive when the odds said otherwise. Why'd you really come? John asked, looking at each man. You could have stayed retired, stayed safe. Dave spoke first. Remember Kosovo? That village we found after militia went through. Some things you can't walk away from. Some fights need fighting. Cartels took my cousin's farm in Texas, Tom added. By the time anyone could do anything, it was too late. Not happening again. Not here. Mike just shrugged, but his eyes were hard. You called. That's enough. Sam looked up from his computer. They're moving faster than we thought. Intercepted orders. Main force mobilizing for tonight. No warning, no negotiation. They're come and take the farm and send a message. Perfect. John smiled grimly. Let's give them a message of their own. They spent the next hour fortifying key positions. Tom rigged the main road with explosives that could flip an armored vehicle. Mike set up 3 different sniper nests, each covering a different approach. Sam established a command center in John's basement, linking their communications and surveillance. Remember Kandahar? Mike asked as they worked. That night raid that went sideways when the whole city lit up? Tom chuckled. Never saw so much firepower in my life, until John called an audible. turned their own defenses against them, Dave added, "Still don't know how you knew that would work." "Simple." John said, "Checking ammunition stores. People get predictable when they think they have the advantage. Cartels the same way. They're used to civilians, used to easy victories. They won't be ready for what's coming." Sam's voice crackled over their earpieces. Movement at the Smith place. They're assembling their force. Thermal imaging shows at least 20 vehicles. "They're not subtle anymore," Tom observed, finishing his last explosive trap. "Coming in like an army." "Good," John replied. "Means they're scared. Scared men make mistakes." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the valley. John stood with his team on the porch, watching the day fade. They were no longer young men, but age had brought something else. Experience, patience, the kind of wisdom that only comes from decades of combat. "Mike, I want you in the North Tower best sight lines, and they won't expect anyone up there. Tom, rig the barn for remote detonation. Make it look like a tempting target. Sam, keep monitoring their comms. The moment they split their forces, we take advantage. Dave, medical station in the basement, but be ready to move. This gets hot, we'll need you mobile." Each man nodded, understanding their roles without need for further explanation. This wasn't their first impossible mission, just maybe their last. "One more thing," John added, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We're not just defending a farm. We're defending every family in this valley. Every person these bastards would victimize. We do this right. We do it clean, and we do it permanent." As his team moved to their positions, John checked his weapons one final time. Max sat beside him, alert and ready. In the distance, he could see dust clouds rising, the Cartel's forces assembling. They thought they were preparing to raid an old man's farm. Instead, they were walking into a trap laid by some of the most experienced combat veterans alive. The radio crackled. Sam's voice was tight. "First wave moving out. ETA 20 minutes. "Copy that," John replied, signaling to his team. "Remember, let them get comfortable. Let them think they have the advantage. Then we show them what real soldiers can do." The Montana sun disappeared behind the mountains, plunging the valley into darkness. But darkness had always been their ally. In the shadows, John Carter wasn't a farmer anymore. He was Shadow again, the ghost that hunted other ghosts. And he was about to remind the Cartel why that name had once struck fear into the hearts of far more dangerous men than them. By dawn, the battle was over. The Cartel's forces lay defeated, their vehicles burning, their men captured or fleeing. John's team had dismantled the Cartel's operation in just 5 days, using nothing but a remote farm, decades of combat experience, and tactical genius. As the sun rose over Green Valley, John stood on his porch, surveying the damage. The farm bore the scars of battle, but the valley was safe. The Cartel had learned a hard lesson. Some old soldiers never lose their edge. John turned to his team, a small smile on his face. "We did it, not just for us, but for everyone in this valley. They'll think twice before coming back." Mike nodded, cleaning his rifle. Sometimes the best defense isn't just strength. It's knowing how to use it. John looked out over the valley, now peaceful once more. This land is worth protecting. And as long as we're here, it will be. Moral of the story. This story teaches us that true strength lies not just in power, but in wisdom, preparation, and the courage to stand up for what's right. John and his team showed that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a well-prepared and united group can overcome any threat. It also reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who don't look threatening at all. In the end, it's not just about fighting battles. It's about protecting what matters most. Our homes, our families, and our way of life.